The most important thing I hope people take away from my content is that uh, death is nothing to be feared. And that if you talk about it and learn about it, you will have less anxiety about it. And it is the best way to have a good death.
This is the Buried in Work podcast, where we share tips and interview experts to help you simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks.
Penny Hawkins-Smith is a nationally certified hospice and palliative care nurse. She is a social media influencer and the author of Influencing Death, Reframing Dying for Better Living. And yes, if you're on social media, you've likely seen her content before. She has more than 2 million followers across multiple social media platforms. Find her at Hospice Nurse Penny. Now, you have over 20 years of experience in various hospice and care roles that includes inpatient care, home hospice case management, education, quality, even regulatory compliance. But you bring a side of hospice care that so many people just aren't familiar with. And that's really why we're happy that you're here today. Penny, it's great to see you.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, you sent over an advanced copy of your book, which we were really fortunate to read. Thank you for that. And it opens up in your author's note with a really neat passage. It says, "When I tell people I'm a hospice nurse, I'm usually met with one of two responses. That must be so sad, or you're an angel. It's not, and I'm not is what your response is." Let's dive in. Why are you not an angel? Why is hospice not sad?
Well, why I'm not an angel goes back many, many years. I became a hospice nurse because I had a rocky starting in my life. I was a drug addict. I went to jail several times. I was an alcoholic. I gave my son to his dad to raise. So just kind of a failure to launch for a long while. Finally turned my life around and became a homeschooling mom during my second marriage with my 2 daughters, got my son back in my life. And then when my second husband and I decided to divorce, I needed a career. So I went to nursing school. I was 40 years old when I went to nursing school. And I wanted to do something that I considered service work, just to kind of make up for the sins of my past. So it was either going to be work in a long-term care facility where at that time there was a lot of abuse happening, or be a hospice nurse. I had a little bit of experience when my former stepmother-in-law went on hospice, and I was really impressed with the nurses, and I just really recognized that work was sacred. Fortunately, my path led me into hospice, and it's what I've done ever since. So I'm human, and when people say, "Oh, you're an angel," it's just cringy to me. Not only because I know that I'm not an angel, I'm just a human, but also all of my colleagues too. We are human, and we are so gifted that we are allowed to do this work. I've always said it's a gift to me. Like I'm not gifted, but I have received the gift of being able to do this work. So it's really, really special to me to be able to do it. And I know that my colleagues in hospice feel the same way, that we're human. We're not angels. We just are able to do something that not a lot of people can do. And as far as it being sad, it's not sad. There is an element of sadness to it, obviously. When the person dies, that's the expectation. So if you've done everything you can to make sure that person had a comfortable death and that the family was prepared for what was happening and not afraid of what they were seeing, then it's a job well done when that person dies. And being with people in these final moments, it's a very real experience, to be with people, and there's laughter and there's life, even though there's death. So I've never felt like it's really sad.
And that's something that resonates through your presence online. You oftentimes utilize humor and dance and storytelling to normalize death and dying. Is that something that is a tool for you to explain and to interact, or is that something that you actually incorporate into your practice also?
Yeah. Oh, well, I not as much of the dancing, but death is a dark subject, right? Nobody wants to talk about it. It's very taboo. And so I felt like when I went onto social media that lightening it up was a good way for some people to be able to digest the information. Sometimes people just need pieces of information, which is something that I've incorporated into my practice, caring for patients and for their families, is, giving them as much as they need at the time. And sometimes that's the whole spiel, and sometimes it's just a little bit at a time, kind of gauging what they can handle. Definitely have used humor with patients and families. Once I am aware that they are going to receive that well, or that they themselves have a sense of humor, you have to pick your spots. But I've just really found that there are some people who just want a little snippet. They want a little bit of fun or funniness to it, and it's been really effective to educate people.
With the education, I imagine that you frequently find yourself dealing with misconceptions or misperceptions. What are some of those myths or items that you wish that more people knew about?
There's so many.
Yeah.
So one is that people think that hospice will cause a person to die faster. That's actually been disproven by a couple of studies, which have shown that people can live longer when they go on to hospice. Another is that people are supposed to wait until they are in their final days for hospice. That is not true either. Hospice requires a terminal condition with a life expectancy of 6 months or less. We really want people to come on as soon as they're qualified, because we have so much that we need to talk to them about. There's a lot of education and information that people need to have when their person is dying, and it's important for us to get them on early so that we are not just in there in the last days bombarding them with everything they need to know.
Can I stop you there? But
Yeah.
before we keep going to the other misconceptions, let's talk about that practical steps. Like, what's the information that you do need to get, that you do want to explain? Because it's really important for listeners to have that practical expectation and understanding. So let's dive into some of the details.
So from the nurse's point of view, first of all, I think it's important that people understand that hospice usually takes place in someone's home. In the US, we provide hospice services to the person wherever they live. There are some long-term care facilities, there are some hospice houses, but the majority of people who are on hospice are going to be in their home or wherever they call home, and their family is going to be their caregivers. So we have to teach them how to care for a person who's dying. This is a person that's declining. They're going to be incontinent. They can't move. They're bedbound, and the family needs to take care of them. In addition to that, there are changes that are going to happen with that person in their body. And we want to be able to educate the family as to what to expect. Because again, if you're going through this and you don't know what to expect, it can be really scary to see the person that you love changing in ways that you could never have imagined. So we are needing to educate. We are needing to make sure that we're getting symptoms managed. We want to make sure that we get a comfort kit or an e-kit in the home that has the medications that we need that are hard to find at Walgreens after hours. So that's from the nursing perspective. Social workers also have a lot to do too. They want to make sure that the people have a funeral home picked out so that they're not flying by the seat of their pants trying to figure out where their person needs to go after their death.
Mm-hmm.
There's often a lot of paperwork that needs to be taken care of. We need to know what the code status is. So we need to have a POLST or advanced directives in place so that that's all taken care of. So the person's not going to end up calling 911 and dying in the hospital. So
Mm-hmm.
there's just many, many things that we want to make sure that we are covering. And it's challenging to do that when you're doing it in the final couple of days or even hours of a person's life.
Is there typically an intake sheet that various hospice companies will utilize? So, all right, you're calling us up. We're going to come to your home. When we get there, can you please fill out this information to make it really easy for us? What does that process actually look like?
Well, it's an election of the hospice benefit. So hospice is a benefit that is a Medicare benefit, and also many insurance companies cover hospice. So they're electing the hospice benefit. So we do have an election form, and then there's going to be information on there as far as their rights and responsibilities.
Mhm.
There's going to be information as far as, again, their code status. What do they want? We talk to them about what are their goals of care. We are going to make sure that if they're getting oxygen, there's an oxygen agreement in place so that we can ensure that they're not going to use flame around oxygen and blow themselves up. There's many things, durable medical equipment that we need to bring in. Not necessarily, I mean, hospices can operate with a checklist. So we'll have a checklist. The admit nurse is going to go through all of these different things, medications, DME, again, the election to the hospice benefit, what's going to be covered as far as services, what's not covered as far as services.
So let's hop back. So we took a little bit of a road trip over here. Let's go back to some of the misconceptions. What are the other ones that you like to talk about?
Well, probably the worst one is that we murder our patients with morphine, that we cause their death, that we hasten their death by giving them morphine. Some people think somehow that that's beneficial to us financially, which makes zero sense because we don't get paid anymore once a person dies, which is not why we don't do that. We don't do that because murder is murder, and that's not our goal. We want to make sure that somebody has a beautiful natural death. The hospice philosophy is we do not prolong life, nor do we hasten death. We allow a natural death. So people they get very spun up about the use of morphine, which is, I would say probably because we use morphine more than any other opioid, and that's because it's cheap. The hospice doesn't get reimbursed for every single thing that we do. We get a flat rate per patient. So like if you go to the ER and you get a Tylenol, they're going to peel a yellow sticker off and they're going to stick it on your chart and they're going to bill you like $10 for a Tylenol. We don't do that. Everything that we do for a person, everything that we provide for a person is all covered under one flat fee, a daily rate, same for every patient, no matter what we do for them. So it's not like we get more money if we give a different drug. So we're going to go with the cheapest drug, and that's morphine. It's also tried and true. It's the gold standard for treating shortness of breath. It's very effective. It can be liquid. It can, go in the mouth, under the tongue, works really well. It's absorbed and the person can, it works really quickly. So we use it the most. So that's why people associate the use of morphine with death. They don't realize that the reason their person went on hospice was because they were dying. So we didn't cause their death. They were already dying. The other thing is that morphine, milligram per milligram, is less strong, less potent than a Percocet. And people seem to be fine with giving someone a Percocet, but morphine, nurses are going to kill their patients with morphine. We just don't do that.
There's the context of morphine in war and when it's used. I think there's just a lot of stigma associated with it that people aren't familiar with. Yeah. Have you seen shifts in the industry over your career? Have things changed? Have procedures changed? Perceptions changed?
Yeah. Well, procedures have changed. We have more procedures that we can do now that can make people more comfortable in their home and manage their symptoms in their home better. I would say that unfortunately, like all healthcare, it's getting to be more work, less nurses. Not that there's a nursing shortage, just that productivity standards have increased. So hospices want their nurses to take on bigger caseloads. So you got to trying to cram in more patient visits per day. So that limits the amount of time that people can spend with their patients and their families. So that has changed. I think it's definitely becoming more popular. It's a benefit financially to Medicare and to insurance companies to have hospice because the person is no longer seeking treatment. They're not going to the ER. They're not going to be hospitalized. So that helps. However, unfortunately, that means that a lot more corporations are wanting to start up hospice agencies because somehow they feel like there's some money to be made. So there's a lot more for-profit agencies now that are popping up. Really used to be more nonprofit agencies. And now there are people that are starting to, try to figure out how to make money in this industry, as they call it.
At Buried in Work, we say that people should create their estate plan comprehensive today for tomorrow, and it has to evolve with them over time. And the reason
Right.
why is the last thing that we want people to go through of figuring out, is there a will? Is there a trust? What are your advance directives? Everything that goes into that bucket. Who needs to be called during that time of grief when things are getting very stressful? I imagine that many people that hospice companies, you, yourself, your colleagues interact with are individuals who are experiencing hospice probably for the first time in their life when this
Mhm.
specific point happens. How can they go through that process and know that the company or the individual that they're working with is the right company or individual for them? Is you guys are professionals. And like you said, different professionals provide different levels of service. There are companies that are coming in with potentially different motivations. How can people in that time of need really get down to the point of, this is the hospice company or individual that I should be working with?
You mean is hospice specifically? Like, how do they know what hospice they should be with? Or,
Yeah. How do you choose
yeah.
and find that match of, this is the right fit for me and what I need?
Okay. So I'm glad you brought that up because that's another myth of hospice, that you have to go with the hospice you're referred to.
Hmm.
And that's not true. People can choose their own hospice and they can self-refer. So if a doctor's not wanting to refer somebody to hospice, the person can self-refer. Medicare has a website. It's medicare.gov/compare, and people can put in their zip code, and it will bring up all the hospice agencies that are Medicare certified in their area. And I never want to go with a non-Medicare certified hospice agency. That's like rule one. You always want to go with a Medicare certified hospice agency because there is more oversight and
Hmm.
there are regulations that have to be followed. And it doesn't matter what your payer is, who your payer is. That doesn't matter. You could have a Kaiser hospice insurance benefit because you're not old enough or you're not disabled enough for Medicare. And that Kaiser benefit is the same as the Medicare benefit, and the hospice has to follow all the same rules for the Kaiser patient as they do for the Medicare patient. The regulations are the regulations. There's just a couple of differences. It's very small that are not patient facing, basically. But other than that, everything has to be followed exactly the same, regardless of the payer. So going to the Medicare Compare website, you can bring up hopefully there's more than one. Unfortunately, there are rural areas like where I live where there's one hospice that serves this area, and it will give you their quality metrics on there. Medicare hospice is very big on quality, and we are required to have a robust quality program, quality assurance, performance improvement program. So you can go on that website and it's going to give you all kinds of different data on which hospices are better. They have a star rating, basically 1 to 5 stars. And you can see on there who's a for-profit, who's a not-for-profit, who serves the most patients, who serves the least patients, and who has the best star rating.
What is the star rating based on? Is that after the process completes, people get a survey?
That's one of them, yeah. So
Mhm.
there's several different components to it. So I think at this time it really is only the CAPS survey, which is a consumer assessment healthcare something or other survey that the family gets after the person dies, that they fill out. And then there's an index rating, and that's pulled from uh, claims data, and
Mhm.
it's things like patients who saw a nurse at least every week. I can't remember all the different ones. There's 10 different metrics for that. And then there's another thing called a hospice item set. And that's patients who were receiving opioids when they had pain. Were they screened within a certain amount of time? Were they given a bowel regimen for opioids? If they were on opioids, that's really important because people get constipated and that sucks.
Mhm.
So there's just different. Were they screened for shortness of breath? Did they have shortness of breath? Was a treatment initiated for shortness of breath? So kind of a bunch of different things that kind of roll up into the star rating.
All right. And you can find all of that information online. Now let's shift one more time. So
Okay.
you've got your primary role as a hospice professional. COVID hit, the pandemic was real. You found TikTok, you found social media, and it has grown prolifically. Now, some people say that you are a social media influencer. I'm actually going to say that you're not. I'm going to say that you are a social media educator in a lot of ways. How are you balancing that work now as hospice quality assurance nurse versus social media educator? Because that's a big task on both sides.
Yeah. Well, I had to cut back my hours at my day job, and I only work 3 days a week. And I'm actually planning on retiring in April next year. I have.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I do want to go back to doing patient care if I can at some point. There, like I said, there's one hospice agency that serves my area, and it's
Yep.
not mine. I work remotely, so that's pretty sweet. But because of the job that I have, I'm working remotely. That has allowed me more time to be able to do the social media.
Now, what has surprised you most about how the public has reacted to your content?
I was well. I'm in the beginning was surprised that people wanted to see it. Yeah, I didn't actually start off on TikTok making hospice or death and dying videos. I started just doing little trendy stuff, and I'm a boomer, so TikTok is for young people. So my little videos didn't go anywhere. But when I made a story about a hospice patient, it went viral, and then all of a sudden I just started gathering followers, and it was really surprising. So I think that surprised me the most, that so many people and so many young people are wanting to know about death and dying. I have people that follow me that are 13 years old, so it's really interesting that there are so many young people that want to know about death and dying.
And it's clear that you're actually paying attention and interacting with those that are following you. Can you share some of the stories or experiences that resonate where you actually made a significant impact in someone's life? Like, is there one that gives you the goosebumps?
Oh gosh, there's lots of them. I mean, I get stories, I get emails and comments and messages from people all the time, but I'll say there is one that gives me goosebumps, and I actually talk about it in my book too. So on social media, when somebody wants you to see somebody else's video, they tag you. So
Hmm.
like in a comment section, they'll go at Hospice Nurse Penny, and I get notified that I've been tagged in a video. And sometimes I get tagged over and over and over in videos. But now I have two stories because I just thought of another one that's really important that's not on my book.
We've
But
got
this
time for
first
both.
one, okay, great. So this woman, Jessica Christine, had colon cancer, and she was fairly young. I want to say, I think she was in her early 40s, maybe late 30s, with colon cancer. And people were tagging me, can you help her? Can you help her? And the video, it had over 10 million views, her video. And she was crying and saying, I've been referred to hospice. I'm going to die. And so I made a response video, and I said, I can't help her because she's justified in her sadness, and she needs to be able to process the fact that her life is coming to an end, and it's normal for her to grieve the end of her life. And then she started wanting to do stuff on her bucket list. So she was like wanting to do things on her bucket list. So I was posting about she wants to have a Mardi Gras. She would like to try beignets. And another TikTok creator picked up on this,
Hmm.
and he owned a beignet truck, and he crowdfunded, and he raised the money to fly where she was and made beignets, and they had a Mardi Gras. So there was this transformation from her really crying and really lamenting her life or the end of her life, and then accepting that she was going to die, and working on her bucket list and making the best out of it.
It's
And it
like
was just
Hospice Nurse Penny
incredible.
Make-A-Wish Foundation. I love it.
And there were other creators involved in that one too. I don't want to take all credit. The other one was a 25-year-old. Her name was Amanda, and she had breast cancer. She had been treating for 5 years, and she had a little 6-year-old daughter. And she befriended me and another nurse that's on social media, Hospice Nurse Julie. And so we did a live event with her where we, talked live on TikTok with her. And she was really sharing her journey with breast cancer and coming close to the end of her life. And then I found out she lived in Spokane, which is 3 hours from me. So I drove over to see her in Spokane. And I met her and her mother. She lived with her mother, and her mother pulled me aside and said, I'm really hoping to do a beautiful memorial for her daughter, because her daughter's 6 years old, and she's like, I really just want to do something for her that's, you know, memorable, since she's losing her mom. And so I started posting videos to raise money for this memorial service. And Julie and I both started posting these videos, and we raised $10,000 through GoFundMe. I set up the GoFundMe, and every week I would send her mom the money through Venmo, and we raised $10,000 for her memorial service. And then Julie and I went to the memorial service and met in person for the first time. So that was really something that I'm very proud of. And I've also raised money for another woman, $40,000 for another woman who was dying of cancer and had, I think, 5 kids she was leaving behind. She was a single mom. So that's probably one of the most rewarding things I can do, is to help somebody like that when they have a GoFundMe.
Wow, that's a significant, impressive impact. It You have multiple different platforms that you operate on. Do you use them differently to have different impacts? Do you think that one needs to have this type of messaging to educate people one way, where, TikTok may trend a little bit younger, so you're focusing on a different message there?
I cross post everything I create on all of my accounts, because sometimes something won't do well on TikTok and it'll do really well on Facebook or Instagram. And there's kind of no rhyme or reason for that. I'm able to answer people's comments on TikTok, which I really like. That's something that I do often, where somebody will put a question in a comment, and I can click on that and then do a video response to that. And it'll show the question on the video in a little comment bubble. And then people can click on the comment and it'll take them back to the original video. So I like that a lot. I still cross post those onto my other channels, even though they don't have the ability to click on them, but they can see the question and they know what I'm answering. I spend a lot more time on Instagram because I feel like I have more engagement on Instagram. I'm able to, through stories, share parts of my life that people are interested in, because people want to know, what drove me to be a hospice nurse? What is it like to be a hospice nurse? How has that impacted my life? So I do that a lot. I do some long form videos on YouTube, but not very many. I find my really, honestly, my shorts are my reels, my TikToks, the shortest ones perform the best.
Yeah.
People like those, especially the little trendy ones.
Yeah.
I find that those are the ones that really perform the best. And I was talking about how sometimes people just want a little snip of information, just a little bit to digest. And early on, I did a video that was a song that said, "It's just water, it's just water." And it's just kind of, do, 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 it's just water. And so I was just dancing around, lip syncing, "It's just water." And the words on the screen were something to the effect of, if you think your person died because they weren't getting any fluids, they didn't. Dehydration is a normal part of the end of life. Just a little quick, it's not even a 15-second video. And a woman commented that I had just relieved her of the guilt that she's had for 15 years over not getting her loved one water or requesting IV fluids at the end of life. And it was then that I was like, light bulb, a
Yep.
little bit of information. And I just recently had another one too. I can't tell you what video it was because I don't remember, but it was the same type of thing where somebody, I think it was probably one where I was lip syncing something and saying, the morphine didn't cause your person to die. They died because they were dying, or something like that, and somebody commented and said, "Thank you so much for this video. It really helped me to not feel guilty about giving my husband morphine at the end of life." And so that has really, to me, been one of the most impressive things about being able to educate on social media, is that you can do it with, people have a short attention span too.
Yeah.
I know I do. And so just being able to grab them with a little snippet of something.
Short attention spans. What's the one most important message that you hope people take away from your content then?
The most important thing I hope people take away from my content is that death is nothing to be feared. And that if you talk about it and learn about it, you will have less anxiety about it. And it is the best way to have a good death.
Now, this was an experience over several decades, from working to social media. Now you're an author. Your book is a culmination of so much. What influenced your approach to writing that book? Is there anything that you want people to keep an eye out for when it comes out? And it comes out soon, right?
January 14th. Yeah, it's available for pre-order now. It comes out January 14th. Well, what prompted me to write the book was I started writing stories about my hospice patients early on when I was a new hospice nurse, and some of those patients are in this book. Unfortunately, I lost a lot of the stories when I got rid of my computer and thought I had transferred the whole hard drive and hadn't. But some of them I still found, and then others I was able to recreate. But before I got on TikTok, I learned about this program Amazon had where you could write a screenplay. And if you were lucky, they would choose your script and make a show about it. So I thought, well, that sounds interesting, because I am really passionate about educating about hospice, and there are no shows on television about hospice or death and dying. And I thought there needs to be, something that's really educating in a real way, where people are shown dying the way people really look like when they're dying, not like their hands are crossed over their chest and their makeup is perfect and their eyes are closed and their mouth is closed and they look like they're asleep. That's not what it looks like in real life. So anyway, I started writing this screenplay and incorporating my stories into this screenplay. And then Amazon stopped doing that program. So it's like, darn it. And so I shelved it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I got on TikTok and I got up to about 100,000 followers, I thought, gosh, you know what? People keep telling me I should write a book. And so maybe I should. And so I started writing it at that time.
Right. And for those that are interested, we'll drop the show notes, or in the show notes, a link to the book. It's called Influencing Death, Reframing Dying for Better Living. It is a phenomenal and exciting and entertaining read at the same point in time. Hospice Nurse Penny, thank you so much for the time today. Your philosophy of not talking about death won't stop it from happening, and the more that you accept it and plan for it, the better your death will be, is 100% on point. And we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Buried in Work podcast. Remember, you can save 10% on our estate preparation package and games with code podcast10 at buriedinwork.com.